What are the best beginner cards in Marvel Snap, and which cards should you be taking out of your deck as soon as you possibly can? My name is Specimen. I've been playing Marvel Snap closed beta for the last 5 months, and I'm here to do a little tier list of all the beginner cards that you get in Marvel Snap. If you want more Marvel Snap content, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and check me out on Twitch, where there's going to be daily Marvel Snap streams. Starting off, we have Star-Lord. Star-Lord is one of the cards that you're going to get in your deck at the very beginning. It's certainly not one of the worst, but it's definitely a card you're going to be looking to replace pretty soon. In Marvel Snap, a really good way of evaluating cards is that for every energy you spend, you want to get around 2 points. Now, Star-Lord is going to be buffing himself by 3 points, so therefore playing for 5 points for 2, which is fantastic. That's above the curve. Again, 4 stats for 2 energy would be about the curve. He's going to play for 5 stats, which is above curve. However, a lot of the time he's going to play for less than that, and it's just not reliable enough to see any competitive play. When you hit that prediction, though, it's fantastic. So if your opponent's playing Hawkeye, for example, he's great. So definitely a decent card early game, but once you get out of like the first few cards, you're going to replace him pretty quickly. Up next, we have the Thing. The Thing is a contender for the worst card in the game. It is a really terrible card. I would argue quite possibly the first card you should be looking to replace in your deck. It's 4 energy, 6 stats. Again, you would want about 8 stats for it to be considered competitive, because it's 4 energy, double that is 8, of course. It's just a really bad card. Get rid of it quickly. I will add a card which has some synergy with the Thing called Patriot, but you don't get Patriot until the 3rd pool of cards, which you're not going to unlock for at least 2 or 3 months. So just don't play the Thing. Get rid of it as soon as you can. Up next, we have Misty Knight. Misty Knight is another one of these starter cards which has no ability, so of course it's not going to be great. However, it is one of the better ones. It's playing for 2 stats for 1 energy. Again, that is on curve. I will add, the lower cost the card is, the more points it should play for. So really, a 1 energy card, even though 2 is technically on curve, really, you want to be getting about 3 points for that at least at this stage, or like some kind of upside. But then when you get higher up to like 6 energy, a card like the Hulk, for example, I think is like very decent. Yeah, Misty Knight is okay, but like realistically, there's very few cards in that cost 1 that are worse than Misty Knight. So she's definitely something you should replace quickly. I just think you should be prioritizing the Thing, for example, before getting rid of Misty Knight. She's bad, but she's not as bad as the Thing, basically, right? Ant-Man up next. I think Ant-Man is a really, really good card. It's 4 stats for 1 energy, and it's just a mid-range card you can play without any real synergies. But also there are synergies with Ant-Man. For example, the card Spectrum, which is in this beginner set of cards, has some nice synergy with it. I think Ant-Man is a contender for going in Broken, but I'm going to put it in Popping Off, mainly just because it's very easily disruptible. Elektra is a card that people will unlock in Pool 1 and is going to be seeing a lot of play early game. And Elektra is just a really big counter to Ant-Man, because she's killing a 1-cost card, which could kill Ant-Man, or just kill a 1-cost card in Ant-Man's lane on the last turn, and then Ant-Man is just playing 1 for 1. So I think Ant-Man's a great card, but it is disruptible, and there's going to be some games as well where you play Ant-Man early and then you have to commit to playing 3 more cards in that lane, and that can be a bad thing. It's a really great card. It's going to be in a lot of your starter decks. It's just a good mid-range value card. We have Colossus up next. Colossus is 3 stats for 2 energy, so slightly below curve. However, it does have some upsides. In particular, it has some big synergies with some death type decks, where you're like just killing a lot of units. Moreover, though, the ability for Colossus not to be able to lose power, I think, is a really big positive. There's zones which are going to give negative stats, and Colossus is going to be really good in there. I'm going to put him in a decent category. It's certainly not a great card, but it's decent, obviously. Up next, we have Ironheart. Ironheart is playing on curve, 6 stats for 3. The downside of Ironheart is often on turn 3, you're not really going to be able to get her full value. Let's say you play 1 card on turn 1, 1 card on turn 2, and then you want to play Ironheart on turn 3, where she's then only playing for 4 stats, which is below curve. However, she's got lots of really nice synergies, in particular the On Reveal deck, which is one of the strongest, if not the strongest deck to be playing early on in the game. There will be lots of deck guides coming for all the starter decks, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on them. Also, another thing which Ironheart can do, which is really, really a nice trick to do in Marvel Snap, is let's say you have a row with your Ant-Man, for example, which has got 4 cards in already. Your opponent then can do the maths on how many points you have in that row. They might just overtake you by a point in that lane on turn 6. 6 and then win another lane. While Ironheart can be a nice little bit of surprise value. You can play your Ironheart, buff up those cards in that lane, get some more stats in there, and surprise your opponent and get a nice win on that turn 6 where the cubes are going to be doubled and therefore you're going to be climbing even more. So Ironheart's a really nice card. I'm not going to put her in popping off, but she's definitely very, very decent, particularly when you add synergies. That's when she can be even better than very decent, for sure. Cyclops up next, another contender for worst card in the game. It's 3 energy, 4 stats, so very far below curve. You basically get one, for 1 energy, you're getting 2 stats on the thing, so they're very, very similar cards. I don't really know which one is worse. They're both terrible. I think they're the 2 worst cards in the game, unfortunately. Even though they have some really nice animations when you're putting them onto the board, you're going to be wanting to get rid of these 2 cards as quickly as you possibly can. I think also, like, even having Misty Knight not in dead feels a bit bad, but I'm just trying to highlight how bad Cyclops and the thing are here, right? And Star-Lord's also kind of trash too, so it's fine. White Tiger up next. White Tiger is a really good card with synergy though. Unlike Ant-Man, Ant-Man's just a good mid-range card which doesn't really require any synergies. White Tiger is a card which on its own is pretty lackluster. It's playing for 8 stats across 2 lanes, which is 2 points below curve. But there's some really nice utilities with it, particularly the synergy it has with Odin, for example, in the on-reveal decks. But then there's also lots of other synergies you can do later on in the game. Mr. Negative, which is one of the best decks when you get to pull 3, for example. But also you can get the Tiger into locations which no cards can be played into. So for example, there's a location called Sanctumorium where no cards can be played. White Tiger is going to be a really nice way of just getting a cheap win in that location. I'm going to put it in popping off. I do think it's, you know, definitely not a mid-range card and definitely a card to build your deck around. I think you could honestly make a case therefore to put it at the top of very decent. White Tiger is kind of the top of very decent, bottom of popping off for me. I think I'm going to put it in very decent just because you need to build your deck around it more than a card like Ant-Man. But yeah, up next we have Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane is another card which is going to be really good in the on-reveal deck for sure. But Wolfsbane buffing by 2 for every card in that location. So if you already have 3 cards in that location, it's playing for 7 stats for 3, which is above curve by 1 stat. So this card is really, really good as a mid-range card and becomes even better with synergy, which is why I'm going to put it in the popping off category. It's just a really good mid-range card that you can include in basically any deck early game and you're going to get good value from it. Of course, the downside of that is if you're maximizing the points on Wolfsbane, you're already committing all 4 of your cards to that lane and then you don't have much flexibility, which maybe is a good time to talk about Nightcrawler then. Nightcrawler is a fantastic card just throughout the game, but particularly early on. It's 2 stats for 1 energy, so the same as Misty Knight, but the big upside is that you can move this card once. Now, there's lots of synergies with that. Miles is one of those, which is the current Battle Pass card. But a card called Angela in pool 1 has synergy, and even just as an example with Wolfsbane, let's say you have your Nightcrawler in the lane you Wolfsbane. Usually the big downside of Wolfsbane is therefore you've completely committed to that lane to maximize its points. Well, no, on turn 6 you could move Nightcrawler out and then add some more stats into that lane to surprise your opponent. Also, it has the upside of being able to win locations for cheap, which you can't play cards into, like Sanctumorium, for example. It's just a really fantastic starter card that's going to be in almost all of your decks, I would advise, early game. Really, really great card. Up next, we have Mr. Fantastic. Mr. Fantastic is a pretty decent card. It's putting 2 stats into the adjacent lane, so you want to play it in the middle lane, and then it's playing for 6 stats for 3, which is very much on curve, and it also has some nice synergies. Honestly, I think you could make a case to put Mr. Fantastic in the very bottom of the very decent category, because it is playing for 6 stats for 3, which is on curve. It's not really seeing much play at a high level, but early game, certainly going to be a card that you're going to be wanting to play a lot of. I remember when I first started out, I was a huge fan of Mr. Fantastic. It also has synergies with Spectrum, like these ongoing decks, and Onslaught, which is a card you get in pool 1 as well. So I think it deserves to be at the very bottom of the very decent, but I will add, like, these 3 cards are quite a bit better than it. I almost want to move Hulk up as well. I'm such a big Hulk fanboy, but we'll do a little pass right at the end to see if there's anything we want to change our minds on. Up next, we have Odin. Odin is a 6 cost card, 8 stats, which is going to be repeating the reveal abilities in that lane. So great synergy with White Tiger, Ironheart, Wolfsbane. I'm going to put it in the popping off category. Odin, unlike the other two in the popping off category, is not a mid-range card. You very much need to be building your deck around Odin, having lots of synergies for this card to be popping off, but it is one of the best 6 drops that you're going to get early game. It's just a really good card. It's a big finisher. You build your whole deck around it. You can't really go wrong with Odin. And next we have Hawkeye. Hawkeye is playing for 3 stats for 1 energy, which is in theory above curve, but as mentioned, these 1 energy cost cards are usually the ones you want to be playing for the most points. So Hawkeye, surprisingly not that good in my opinion. It's definitely a decent card. It's one of the starter cards that you're not going to replace that quickly, but there's just many better options for 1 cost. For example, Nightcrawler, even though it's playing for 1 stat more, that utility you get is just fantastic. Also, Hawkeye is really bad against cards like Star-Lord, which people have access to very early. And moreover, you're just really forcing yourself to make a play which you might not want to make. Like, information in Marvel Snap is key because you're playing cards at the same time as your opponent. Your opponent knowing that you're going to be playing a card in a certain location in the next round, next turn, is honestly a really big deal. So that's why Hawkeye is decent and not very decent. It's definitely a decent card, no doubt about it. Iron Man up next. Iron Man. Iron Man right now in the current meta in pool 3 is one of the best cards in the game, but that's relying on big synergy with Mr. Negative. Having said that, Iron Man is a fantastic card, doubling the power of a location. There's big synergy with cards like Spectrum, all sorts of synergies Iron Man has. I'm not going to put it in the broken category. I think, honestly, when you get to pool 3, you could make a case for it. I'm going to put it in the popping off category. It's just a really good value card. You cannot really go wrong with Iron Man. It's going to secure you a lane. Also worth mentioning, Enchantress is a card that you get access to in pool 1, which is going to be a really popular tech. Enchantress is removing the ongoing abilities for all cards in that lane. So let's say you play Iron Man on turn 5, your opponent then can Enchantress on turn 6, removing the ability of your Iron Man and any other ongoing cards in that location. So Iron Man, very easily counterable, so it's definitely not broken, but it is a fantastic card. We have Medusa up next. Medusa is buffing herself by 2 if you play in the middle lane. So she's playing on curve, 4 stats for 2, but she just doesn't really have much utility, right? You have to play in the middle lane. She's not really doing much for you. There's not really many synergies in Medusa. She's just a decent card, nice mid-rangey card that you can put in your deck early, but certainly not one that you're going to be playing in a month's time. The Punisher up next. Pretty similar. Punisher playing for 6 stats for 3 cost. Does have some more synergies than Medusa, but also is less reliable in achieving those 6 stats, as you need your opponent to have 4 cards in the opposite location. Has the ongoing tag, so it has synergy with Spectrum. It's just a decent card. Again, a nice card to put in your deck early because it's good value. It's going to be better than cards like Star-Lord, Misty Knight, etc. But again, certainly one that you're going to be wanting to replace with these other cards once you have the opportunity to do so. Quicksilver next. Quicksilver, very similar to Misty Knight, 2 stats for 1 energy. The thing with Quicksilver is that it's always in your opening hand, which, while that has some upsides, because you're always going to have a card to play on turn 1, you might not even need to include any other 1-cost cards. If you really just want to have a nice mana curve, play a card turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. However, realistically, the downside of Quicksilver is ginormous, which is that he's always in your hand. That means you're going to be drawing 1 less card of your deck every game. So if you have a combo deck, for example, with cards like Odin and Wolfsbane, you're just slightly less likely to achieve, to draw all those combo pieces because Quicksilver is always taking up one of the cards which you draw each game. I do think it's better than Misty Knight. It has some utilities. Quicksilver, actually, when I first started playing, I thought was broken, but that was 5 months ago, and I've realized the error of my ways. It's definitely an underrated card in my opinion. Certainly not a dead card. It's one I like a lot, but it's certainly a pretty meh card. I'm going to put it above Star-Lord, though, in my opinion, but I'm a little biased. It was actually the first card I ever got to Infinity and got the split on. Sentinel up next. Sentinel had a moment in the meta where it was just one of the best cards in the game. It does have a lot of synergies with cards which you get, I think, in pool 2 with the Collector. Devil Dinosaur in pool 1 is one of the best pool 1 cards, and Sentinel is really good. I'm not going to put it in popping off category. A few months ago it would have been. It's going to go in the very decent category for sure. It is going to be relying on quite a bit of synergy to really maximize this card. But even early game, it's just good to give yourself a nice mana curve, right? You're always going to have this 2 energy card in hand. Okay, it's playing for undercurve because it's 3 stats for 2 cost. But the fact that you're then getting this 2 energy card back into your hand, and then you're just not going to be wasting much energy when you have Sentinel in your deck. So that is why it is in the category it's in. I feel like the music has stopped No, the music's still going. All right, we continue. We continue. It's just gone a bit quiet. Shocker up next. Shocker, another one of these dead cards, which is just got no ability. You're going to be wanting to replace Shocker very, very quickly. 3 stats for 2. So it's basically Sentinel without any upside, right? The only upside of Shocker is the synergy it has with Patriot and the DC location, which is buffing cards with no abilities. So yeah, that's when Misty Knight, Shocker, Cyclops, the thing are actually good when the DC location comes up. I say they're good. Misty Knight's good. Shocker's okay. Basically, Misty Knight is you can see the little order, in my opinion. The cheaper, the better, right? And they just get worse as they get heavier. With some exceptions, because the Hulk is up here, and also we still haven't put Abomination down either. Up next, we have Miles Morales. He is the current Battle Pass card in October. So if you're watching this in November and you're like, I don't have access to this card, this is a paid card for this month's Battle Pass. You're going to be able to get access to this in a couple of months' time, probably in Pool 3. He is 5 stats, 4 cost, which is terrible, but he turns into a 1 cost card when a card moved last turn. Nightcrawler obviously being a key example. There's also some movement decks. I'm going to put it in the bottom of very decent. Like, you can't really argue with 5 stats for 1 cost, but the synergies are very much, a little bit awkward at times. Nightcrawler being the obvious example, and in fairness, if your opponents are all playing Nightcrawler as well, you could probably even put it in the popping off categories. It's 1 stat more than Ant-Man, and it's not going to be as easily disruptible as Ant-Man. But of course, there's some games where you're just not going to be able to play it because it's going to be you're not going to be able to trigger its ability. It's a very decent card if you've got the right deck for it. If you don't have the right deck for it, it is a dead card. So just make sure if you're playing Miles, you're building your deck around it. You've got some movement cards. It's definitely not in popping off because it's just not like Ant-Man where it's just unconditionally good pretty much. Spectrum up next. Spectrum got buffed recently. And before her buff, she was one of the worst 6-cost cards in the game. I have not really had an opportunity at the time of recording to try out the starter decks with Spectrum in. Previously, Odin was always the top meta early one. I am going to be doing a Spectrum deck and we'll let you know, so make sure you check out that video at the time of watching if it's out. I'm going to put Spectrum into the very decent category. I wouldn't be surprised if Spectrum honestly goes to popping off. Kind of just remains to be seen how the early game meta shapes out, because the early game meta is going to be very different to the meta that I've been playing on in Pool 3. She's buffing your ongoing cards by 2, and as you can see, there's a lot of good ongoing cards. We have Ant-Man, Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic all up here. The Punisher's decent, Hawkeye, Colossus, like all of these ongoing cards are pretty solid, and we've also got a few more still to be placing down in here. Jessica Jones up next. Jessica Jones is 8 stats for 4. She's just very decent. She's playing on curve. While Medusa is also playing on curve and only in the decent, the higher up you get with these cards, like the better playing on curve is, the lower cost, like the less impressive that is. So that's why a card like Misty Knight, even though it's playing on curve, is really not that impressive. Even Hawkeye is playing above curve, but it's only decent. But then you've got a card like the Hulk, which is on curve exactly, but it's very decent. The higher up you get, the more happy you kind of are to achieve this curve. So Jessica Jones, I think, is in the very decent category. 8 stats for 4. You can't really go wrong. She's got some very nice combo plays with some cards you are going to unlock later, like Storm, for example. You can play Storm on turn 3, which floods the location, meaning that's going to be the last. Next turn is the last turn people can play cards there. Then you play your Jessica Jones, and you just have 8 stats as a nice follow-up play. So Jessica Jones having just 8 stats in a body that you can play on turn 4 is actually a really nice thing for a lot of decks. It's just a solid card. It's also an on-reveal card, right? But no synergy with Odin. So, yeah, you're not going to want to play this in your on-reveal deck necessarily. Abomination up next. Abomination is 9 stats for 5, so slightly below curve. When you compare it to the Thing, it's significantly better. I'm actually going to put Abomination in the decent category. 9 stats. It's just honestly not bad. It's similar to Jessica Jones. You're paying 1 more energy for 1 less stat, but obviously you don't have the downside of not being able to play in the location, in Abomination's location next turn. It's a pretty decent card, honestly. I don't hate it, don't love it. You're going to replace it pretty soon, but yeah, it got buffed recently, and I think it's kind of solid. Blue Marvel up next. Blue Marvel also got a big buff recently. Previously, it was a 6-cost card and was pretty terrible. Unfortunately, the thing with Blue Marvel is a lot of the cards that you're getting at the start aren't really swarming too much. If you actually look, I think there's only one card here which is playing two cards at once, which is White Tiger. You have two bodies, right, in one card, and Blue Marvel's really benefiting off cards where you're getting lots of swarm down. Having said that, when you get access to pull one, there's a card Squirrel Girl, which is playing three bodies in one. I think Blue Marvel's just a very decent card that you're going to be able to build your deck around later on in the game. Not going to be a deck that you're going to want to build around, a card you're going to want to build around, I would say, with this beginner set of cards. But when you hit pull one, definitely something that you might want to be building your deck around. And the fact that it's 5 cost, honestly, you can't really go too wrong, right? Also, it's got ongoing synergy with Spectrum. It's also got some nice synergy with Iron Man, for example, because you're going to be putting more stats into that Iron Man lane. And it is another one of those cards similar to Ironheart, which I think Ironheart needs to come further over here. Similar to Ironheart, where you're going to be able to put stats into a lane which is already full. I'm wondering if Mr. Fantastic should maybe drop. Yeah, maybe Mr. Fantastic belongs in decent. It's a decent card. I don't know if it's very decent. I think all these are very decent. Yeah, I think Mr. Fantastic drops. Cool. I'm also tempted to bump up Hulk, but we'll talk about that again. Gamora, she can play for 11 stats for 5, which is above curve. Similar to Star-Lord, though, that's going to be pretty unreliable. I do think Gamora is decent. Nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, cool. Finally, Khazar. Khazar was one of the best meta cards early game. When I first started playing 5 months ago, it was pretty much the only good 4-drop that you got access to early. Jessica Jones now being a really good 4-drop as well. And you probably don't want to be playing definitely no more than 2 4-drops in the same deck. I wouldn't include Miles in that because really Miles is like a 1-drop, right? Khazar's just a very decent card. Nice synergy with Blue Marvel in like these swarm type decks. Also has synergy with Spectrum as an ongoing card. I'm going to put it in the very decent category as well. I'm going to bump JJ up, I think, to here as it's more of a mid-range card. And that is my tier list. Maybe we should just bump Misty Knight down as well. Let's bump Misty Knight down. Yeah. You could also honestly make a case to bump Quicksilver, but I'm a bit of a Quicksilver fanboy. I like the card a lot personally. There's some decks that I have played a lot of Quicksilver with. He's just honestly my favorite card. Like, even though he's kind of trash, he's just got, you know, he's got a place in my heart because when I first started playing it, I thought he was so good. So I like it a lot. Here's my tier list. Is there anything we want to change? As you can notice, a lot of the cards which you're getting in your beginner deck are right at the bottom. So the things Cyclops, Shock, and Misty Knight should be your priority to be getting rid of and replacing. Star-Lord also a big priority. Hawkeye is also one of these starter cards, but definitely not one of the cards you should be getting rid of first. Similar with Abomination, but bear in mind when you get a card like Iron Man, for example, which is a 5-cost card, you're probably not going to want to play 2 5-cost cards in the same deck. Usually when I build decks, I just have 1 5-cost card and 1 6-cost card. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with your hand with too many cards which you can't play, and you're going to be wasting energy. So even though Abomination is up in this decent category, I'm probably going to be replacing it for Iron Man as soon as I get Iron Man in almost all of my decks. Also, just to add, I personally am very tempted to put, in fact, I'm going to do it. I don't care. I'm putting Hulk in the popping off category. I love Hulk. 12 stats for 6 energy, I think is fantastic. The reason I like Hulk so much is because you don't have to play it, right? You can just forfeit if Hulk is not winning you the game. Because on turn 6, the cubes are doubling. And this is like the main round to retreat if you're losing in, right? Let's say no one snapped. It's just going to be a 1-cube game. And then you can either play if you're winning, or you can retreat and just lose 1 cube, or win and get double that, right? So that's a really nice position to be in. A lot of the times what you want to do with Hulk, let's say you're winning 2 locations, and then Hulk, you could play it in the 3rd location to be getting ahead on that. The way I like to look at it is, if I'm winning in all 3 locations before my opponent plays a card, I'm giving them a lot of work to do. They're going to need to not be playing a 6-cost card, right? They're going to need to be playing 2 cards in 2 locations to win 2 of them. And Hulk, in my opinion, is just a really, really nice card early game, where you're just going to be making sure you're getting those turn 6 wins because you've just got this big stat stick, 12 stats, dump it down in a lane to secure that location. And as I say, often the way I play with Hulk, I'm winning 1 location on the left, I'm winning 1 location on the right. My opponent's winning the middle location, let's say by 11 points. Bang, I play Hulk in the middle, and then they're going to really need to come up with something special to beat me. So that is my tier list. Please let me know if there's anything that you disagree with. I also think White Tiger is a huge contender to go up into the popping off. I think Spectrum is also a bit of a dark horse, which could end up going up in there. Certainly late game in pool 3, she has some nice synergies, but kind of remains to be seen. They're the ones to keep an eye on. Let me know in the comments below if there's any cards that you disagree with. Do you think Quicksilver should be in the dead category? Do you think that Colossus should be in the meh category? I think maybe it should. Oh, I'm going to put Colossus in the meh category. No. All right. That's my tier list. I'm done. All right. I'm done. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you watched this far, please do like it. Check me out on Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, all of that. Also, there's a Discord for Marvel Snap discussion. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. My name's Specie, and see you on the next Marvel Snap video. Deuces.